define desired behaviors. Now, here's the thing with recognition, positive reinforcement, recognition, feedback, if you want to call it that, right? The first problem is that it tends to be really kind of this vague and not really meaningful, where we say things like, hey, thanks, bud. Or, man, you're the best. Or appreciate all you do. And this is a problem because I don't know what this means. And so we a lot of times are saying this out of habit. So I have this client and this leader in a client organization. His name is Corey, and he was talking about a boss that he had who did this. And every single time, right, they would have this interaction. Corey would take on something and he would say, appreciate all you do. Thanks for all you do. And Corey said, the first couple of months that he was working for this manager, he's like, man, this guy is awesome. He really appreciates me. He sees the good work I'm doing. But after month 2 and 3 and 4, and the boss kept saying, appreciate all you do, Corey didn't value that anymore because he didn't think it was meaningful. He didn't think it meant anything. It was just something he said to everybody. Just something he just says that. It's more of a habit. So in order for reinforcing feedback to be meaningful, to help get those desired actions, we have to recognize helpful behaviors. So we start by defining what are those helpful behaviors. Now, when I first walk people through this process, people usually come up with things like, well, I want you to take responsibility. I want people to have ownership, to take initiative. And this brings us to the second problem, where even though we've kind of started down the path of defining the behaviors, it's still vague language. What does that mean? Take responsibility. What does that even mean? You know what? My definition of that might be different than your definition of that. And so we want to be more specific, and we want to think about, well, if somebody were taking responsibility, what would I see and what would I hear? How would I know? What would I see and what would I hear? This is what's going to tell us what the behaviors are. So let's go through some examples of specific behaviors you might define, right? And these are just generic. You're going to define the specific behaviors that you want. So it might be things like checking your work for errors before submitting it, or submitting your paperwork on time. Those attitude things are the way people show up. Well, we can't say I want positive attitude because I can't, what does that mean? But we can define that. We can go layer deeper and say, oh, you know what? Making eye contact and smiling in conversations, or using a positive, upbeat tone in meetings. Or maybe you're thinking about, how does your team collaborate daily? What are the daily things that need to get done? And it might be asking others for their input, or raising quality problems to the team. So it depends on what you need. What are those behaviors that you want folks to use? Now, here's why this is so important, is because when we give reinforcing feedback, we're doing two things. One is we're recognizing, right? We're recognizing that contribution, and people feel good from that. The other is we want to change or get future behavior, right? So we want to drive some of this future behavior in this way of reinforcing feedback. And the way to do it is to be specific. If I don't share the specific behavior, then the other person doesn't really know what it is that I want them to do more of. They don't really know what it is that was helpful. So that's your first step, is you want to define the specific helpful behaviors that you would like others to do. Now, I encourage you to actually write them out. What are the specific helpful behaviors? And you may just pick a few to start with. What are the ones that you want to train your brain to look for?